The text went to the wrong number at 1147 on a Tuesday night. Nora Vass had been walking for 6 minutes before she was certain. Certain was important. She did not act on uncertain. She had the habit, which she had always thought of as a virtue, of needing to verify before she responded. And what she had been verifying for 6 minutes was whether the man in the dark jacket, who had been behind her since the corner of Ashby and Vine, was following her or simply walking in the same direction at the same pace, which was a thing that happened in cities and was not automatically sinister. At the 3-minute mark, she had turned left onto Clement, which was not her most direct route home, and he had turned left onto Clement. At the 4-minute mark, she had stopped at the window of a closed bookshop to look at the display, and he had stopped at a distance that was far enough to be plausible and close enough to be intentional. At the 6-minute mark, she had enough data. She took out her phone and opened her messages and typed quickly, looking at the phone rather than at the man, because looking at the phone was normal and looking at him was not. She found the contact she was looking for, which was her friend Jess, and she typed, "Times. He's following me. Dark jacket. I'm on Clement near the park. Don't call, just text back." She pressed send. The message went to the wrong number. She did not know this immediately. She put the phone in her pocket and kept walking and counted her steps because counting was something to do that was not panicking, and she was not going to panic. She was on the north side of Clement, and there was the park to her right, and the street was not empty. There were people, a couple walking a dog, a man coming out of the late convenience store, and none of them were the man in the dark jacket, because the man in the dark jacket was still behind her at approximately 30 feet, and she could hear the particular rhythm of his footsteps, which she had been cataloging for 6 minutes. Her phone vibrated. She thought Jess. "Thank you." She took it out. The reply was from the number she had texted, which she glanced at and did not immediately recognize as wrong because she was not looking carefully enough, and the first 4 digits matched, and the message said, "Times. Turn around." 2 words. She stood on the pavement on Clement Street at 1147 on a Tuesday night, and she read the 2 words, and she thought about them for approximately 2 seconds, which was 1 second longer than it should have taken, and then she turned around. There was a man standing under the street lamp 15 feet away. He was not the man in the dark jacket. He was taller than the man in the dark jacket, and standing differently, the way people stood when they had decided where they were, and were not planning to move from it. And he was looking at her with the specific attention of someone who had been looking in a particular direction for a reason and had just found the reason looking back. The man in the dark jacket was gone. She looked at the space where the man in the dark jacket had been, and then at the man under the street lamp, and then at the space again, and then she did a thing that she did not fully understand, even as she was doing it, which was that she walked the 15 feet toward the man under the street lamp, rather than in any other direction. She stopped 6 feet from him, close enough to speak without raising her voice, far enough to not have made an irreversible commitment. He was looking at her. He had dark eyes and the face of someone who did not offer expressions as social currency, and a jacket that was not dark. It was gray, which meant he was not the man she had been tracking. He had his phone in his left hand, and the screen was showing the message she had sent, and she could see her own words on it. "He's following me. Dark jacket. I'm on Clement near the park. Don't call, just text back." She looked at her own words on his phone. She looked at him. "Wrong number," she said. "Yes," he said. "You replied anyway." "Yes." She thought about this. The man in the dark jacket was not there. The street was the same street it had been 2 minutes ago. She was standing 6 feet from a man she did not know, who had received her message by accident, and had replied, and had apparently been close enough to her position to say, "Turn around," and have it be accurate. "Why are you on this street?" she said. He looked at her for a moment. He had a quality of stillness, That was not the stillness of someone who was uncertain, but the stillness of someone who was deciding how much of the truth was appropriate for the moment. "Same reason you are," he said. "I'm walking home." "I know." He looked at the space where the man in the dark jacket had been. "He's not coming back tonight." She followed his gaze to the empty pavement. "You know him." He did not answer immediately. She noted the pause, and what the pause contained, which was not evasion but specificity. The pause of a person deciding what category of answer this question belonged to. "I know of him," he said. She looked at the man under the street lamp, and she ran the information she had, which was not much. A wrong number that had responded correctly. A man in the right position at the right time. A person she had sent a distress message to who had already been on the street when the message arrived. A man in a dark jacket who had been following her for 6 minutes and had disappeared in the time it took her to read 2 words and turn around. She was 31 years old, and she had a graduate degree in library science, and she was very good at finding and assessing information. And what she was assessing right now was a situation that had more variables than she currently had data for, and her instinct was to get more data before making any decisions. "What's your name?" she said. He looked at her. "Eli," he said. "Nora." She put her phone back in her pocket. "The person I was trying to text is named Jess. I looked at the wrong contact. I figured you didn't ask who I was trying to reach. It wasn't relevant to the situation." She thought about this. It was correct. Who she had been trying to reach was not relevant to the situation, which was that she had been followed, and the following had stopped, and she was standing on Clement Street at 1147 at night with a man named Eli, who had her message on his phone and who had been on the street already. The irrelevance of Jess was accurate, and the accuracy of it was itself information about how this person organized problems. "The man who was following me," she said. "You were watching him." He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Not me." "Not primarily," he said. She noted the qualifier. "But you knew I was there." "When the message came through, I knew where you were," he said. "I was already in the right position." She looked at the street lamp. She looked at him. She thought about right position, and what that meant in the context of someone who had been watching a man who had been watching her and had been in a position close enough to respond in the time it took her to read 2 words. "What do you want me to do now?" she said. He looked slightly surprised, which was the first expression she had seen from him, and it lasted approximately 1 second. "Go home," he said. "Lock your door. Don't come this way tomorrow." "Why not this way tomorrow?" He was quiet for a moment. "Take a different route." "Is he going to come back?" He looked at her steadily. "Not tonight," he said. "Beyond that, I don't know yet." She looked at the empty street. She looked at him. She thought about 6 minutes of careful verification and a wrong number and 2 words and the man in the dark jacket who was not there. She thought about times, not primarily times, and times I was already in the right position times, and the specific quality of how Eli had looked at the space where the man in the dark jacket had been, which was the look of someone for whom the space and the person who had occupied it were already part of a larger picture she did not have. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. It was a small nod, the nod of someone receiving thanks for a practical action rather than a generous one. She turned and walked south toward her building, and she did not look back. And when she reached her door and went inside and locked it, she stood in her entryway and thought about the evening and what she now knew and what she still did not know, which was most of it. She opened her contacts and found the number she had actually texted, which she could now see was not Jess's number. The first 4 digits were the same, and then they diverged. She looked at the name attached to the contact she had tried to reach, which was Jess Navarro, and she looked at the name attached to the number she had actually reached, which was nothing, because the number was not saved, and had no name. She looked at the 2 words on her screen: times, turn around. She did not save the number. She thought about it. She put the phone in her pocket and went to make tea she did not drink, and she sat at the kitchen table and thought about the man in the pie, dark jacket, who had been following her for a reason she did not know, and the man under the street lamp, who had been watching that man for a reason he had not told her, and the 43 words she had sent to the wrong person that had arrived at the right time. She thought about her father. She did not know why she thought about her father. She thought about it for a moment, and then she stopped thinking about it and went to bed and lay in the dark and thought about it anyway, until she fell asleep. He found her at the library at 10:15 the next morning. She was at the reference desk on the 2nd floor when she looked up, and he was at the top of the stairs. He was wearing different clothes from the night before, a dark shirt and trousers, and he was carrying nothing. He looked around the floor in the systematic way of someone locating a specific thing among many things, and then he found her and came across the room without hesitating. She had been waiting for him, not specifically, not consciously, but she had gotten to work early and had arranged herself at the reference desk by 9:30 rather than her usual 10, and she had been looking up at the stairs at intervals since then, which was data she noted about herself without analyzing yet. He stopped at the desk. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment. The library was doing its morning things, a student at the computers, a woman in a green coat returning books, the particular quiet of a space that held information and expected people to treat it accordingly. "You knew I work here," she said. "Yes." "How?" He was quiet for a moment. "I looked into you last night after I had your number." She thought about this. After he had her number. He had had her number since 1147 the previous evening, when 43 words had arrived from the wrong contact. And between then and now, he had used the number to find out where she worked, and had come here rather than calling her, which was a choice, she noted. Why here instead of calling? Calling is easy to not answer. He said, "I needed to talk to you in person, and I needed you to be able to see me when I said it." She looked at him. "You needed me to see your face, so you could decide whether to believe me." She thought about that. It was an unusually transparent thing for a person she did not know to say, and the transparency of it was itself information, and it landed the way she imagined he had intended it to land, which was as a small concession toward trust in a situation that had not yet established any. "Sit down," she said. He sat in the chair across from the reference desk, the chair intended for researchers with questions. She folded her hands on the desk and looked at him. "Tell me." He looked at her steadily. "The man who was following you last night works for an organization called Mercer. It's not a company. It operates under several company names, but the structure underneath is not commercial." He paused. "They've been watching you for approximately 3 weeks. She absorbed this. 3 weeks. She thought about the last 3 weeks and whether she had noticed anything, and found 2 instances she had filed and dismissed as urban coincidence, a car she had seen twice on different streets, a man outside her building on a Thursday who had been there when she went in and gone when she came out. She had dismissed them because she had not yet had enough data to call them a pattern. She had 3 weeks of data now, and it was a pattern. Why are they watching me? He looked at the desk between them. He looked at her. She recognized the specific quality of what he was doing, which was selecting how much of the truth to give her, and in what order. She had done research work for long enough to recognize the architecture of a partial disclosure. "They believe you have something," he said, "or that you can lead them to something." "What something?" He was quiet. "You said you came in person, so I could see your face." She said, "I'm seeing your face. Tell me what something." He held her gaze. "Documents. A collection of records that would be significantly damaging to Mercer if they became public or landed in the right hands. She looked at the desk. She looked at her hands on it. She thought about why she had thought about her father last night, when she had lain in the dark, trying not to think about something she did not yet understand. She thought about the fact that she had thought about him, and the fact that she was thinking about him now in the specific context of damaging records and an organization called Mercer. "My father," she said. He was very still. "You know something about my father." He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "He died 6 years ago," she said. "He was an accountant. He had a small practice. The official cause of death was a car accident on Route 9 in November." She kept her voice level, which was the way she kept it when she was talking about things that required a great deal of work to talk about at the level register. "I've had questions about the accident for 6 years. I haven't known where to put the questions because there was nothing to put them against." He looked at her. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that come from the accident report, not fully adding up," she said. "Not dramatically, just by a fraction. The direction of impact didn't match where the road curved. The time of the call to emergency services was 7 minutes after the estimated time of impact. 7 minutes is a long time if you're the first person to come on the scene." She looked at the window. "I'm very good at finding inconsistencies in records. It's what I do. And I found those, and I didn't know what to do with them, so I filed them and left them." He was looking at her with the expression she had identified on the street the night before as assessing, but it had changed into something that was not quite that. She was cataloging his expressions the way she cataloged most things, with attention. And what she was seeing now was the expression of someone who had arrived expecting to tell her something, and had found she already knew more of it than anticipated. "What do you know about the documents?" she said. "I know they existed," he said. "I know your father had them. I know Mercer has been trying to locate them for several years." He paused. "I don't know if they still exist, or where they would be." She looked at him. She had a question she had been building toward since she said his name last night, and she asked it now. "What's your connection to this?" He was quiet. "You were on that street last night watching a man who works for Mercer," she said. "You knew who I was after 11 seconds of having my message. You're here at 10:15 in the morning of the next day. You're not a police officer because you'd have said so, and you'd have a different quality of being in a conversation about organizations that operate under company names." She looked at him. "You're on the other side of something from Mercer." He held her gaze. "Yes." "What side?" He was quiet for a moment. "The side that would like those documents to reach the right people," he said, "for reasons that are not entirely altruistic." She thought about not entirely altruistic and what it contained, which was an acknowledgement that his interest was functional rather than moral, which was more honest than most people would have been. The right people being people who can do something with them, he said. "The records contain information about how Mercer has operated in this city for 15 years. There are parties with an interest in having that information documented and verifiable." She nodded slowly. She thought about her father, who had been a small practice accountant with strong opinions about record keeping and a filing system that was legendary among people who had worked with him. And she thought about what a small practice accountant with access to financial records and strong opinions about documentation might have put together over years of looking at numbers that didn't fully add up. She looked at the bag she had under the desk. It was a canvas tote, large, the kind she carried every day because she moved books and files and things that required capacity. In the side pocket, which she always kept in the same side pocket, was a small leather case, dark brown, approximately 4 inches by 3 inches, with a brass clasp that had never been opened. It had been her father's. He had given it to her 3 months before he died, pressed it into her hand at the end of a Sunday lunch, and said, "Keep this," and she had kept it. And she had never opened it, because opening it felt like a decision that could not be undone, and she had not yet made peace with the undoable quality of it. She looked at her bag. She looked at Eli. He was looking at the bag, not at her, at the specific location of the side pocket, which was visible because the bag was canvas, and the outline of the case was visible through the fabric if you knew what to look for, which he apparently did. She looked at the outline through the canvas. She looked at him. "You know what's in there," she said. He looked at her. "I know what might be in there," he said. "I don't know for certain." She put her hand on the side pocket of the bag. She felt the small, hard shape of the case through the fabric. She had carried it for 6 years, and she had not opened it, and she had told herself she would open it when she was ready, and she had not become ready, and now she was sitting at a reference desk in a library. At 10:15 in the morning, talking to a man named Eli, who had received her wrong number text and replied in 9 seconds and was looking at the outline of a leather case through a canvas bag. "I need to think," she said. "Yes," he said. "I'm going to come and find you," she said. "When I've thought, not the other way around. You don't come to me. I'll come to you." He looked at her for a moment. He appeared to be deciding whether this was an acceptable condition, and appeared to decide that it was, which she also noted. "All right," he said. He stood. He took out his phone and he showed her a number on the screen. Not a business card, not a written note, just his phone, with a number showing. She looked at it, and she memorized it, because she was very good at memorizing numbers, and it was not a skill she advertised. He put the phone away. "What I told you about your father," he said. He was standing at the desk and looking at her. "The accident, the questions you had." She looked at him. "I don't have the full picture," he said. "I have enough to believe your questions were the right questions." He paused. "I'm sorry it took this long for someone to say that to you." She held his gaze. She was very still in the way. She was still when something arrived that she had not been structurally prepared for. And she held the stillness. And she did not say, "Thank you," because thank you was not the right thing for this moment. And he appeared to understand that she was not going to say it. He went down the stairs. She watched him go, and then she looked at the library floor and the books and the student at the computer and the woman in the green coat who had moved to the periodicals section. And she thought my questions were the right questions. 6 years too late to do anything with, and also possibly not too late. And I have a leather case in the side pocket of my bag that my father pressed into my hand on a Sunday in August and said, "Keep this." She thought about this for the rest of the morning. At lunch, she sat in the staff room alone, and she took the case out of the side pocket, and she held it in both hands, and looked at it, and she thought, not yet. But soon, she put it back. She went back to the reference desk. She looked up the number she had memorized, and she saved it in her phone under a name that was not his name. Because she was very careful about records, which was a thing her father had taught her. And she thought about what her father had taught her, and what else her father might have left her. And she thought soon. She found him 3 days later. She had spent the 3 days doing the thing she did when she had information she needed to organize before she could act on it, which was work. She had catalogued 2 collections, processed a backlog of interlibrary requests, and reorganized a section of the periodicals that had been in a state she found professionally offensive for 6 months and had never had the mental bandwidth to address. She had also, in the evenings, sat at her kitchen table with her father's leather case in front of her and looked at it. She had not opened it on the first evening because she was not ready. She had not opened it on the second evening because she needed the third evening. On the third evening, she opened it. The clasp was stiff from not having been operated in 6 years, and she had to work it with both thumbs before it released. And the sound it made when it opened was small and ordinary, and nothing like the sound of 6 years of not opening being undone, which was not a sound at all. Inside was a USB drive, small and black, and indistinguishable from the several hundred USB drives that circulated through her workplace at any given time, Beneath the USB drive was a sheet of paper, folded in thirds, with her name on the outside, in her father's handwriting. She looked at her name for a long time. He had written it the way he wrote everything, with the careful precision of someone who had strong opinions about the legibility of a document. She had his handwriting memorized, the way she had things memorized that she did not want to forget. She unfolded the paper. It was a letter. It was short, 4 paragraphs, and it was dated the September before he died, which meant he had written it 2 months before the accident on Route 9. He had written it knowing he might not have more time. She understood this because the letter had the specific quality of something written with purpose rather than the assumption of continuation. He said what he needed to say in the order it needed to be said, and he did not waste words on the conditional. The first paragraph told her what was on the drive records, financial and otherwise, documenting 17 years of Mercer's operations. He had been keeping them for 9 years, quietly, in the specific way that a methodical accountant could keep records quietly, building a picture from numbers that other people had handed him to manage, without realizing what the numbers together said. He told her the drive was encrypted and told her the passphrase in a way that only she would understand, which was a reference to a book they had read together when she was 11, and a page number and the 3rd sentence on that page. The second paragraph told her why he had given it to her rather than to anyone else, which was that he did not know who to trust, and she was the person whose judgment he trusted most completely, which was a thing she had not known. He thought about her and which she sat with for a while. The third paragraph told her to be careful and to trust her own assessment and not to do anything until she understood fully what she was doing, which was advice so characteristic of him that she almost smiled, because it was the same advice he had given her when she was 8 and had wanted to climb a tree she had not fully evaluated. And the advice was the same advice now as it was then, because the principle was the same. The 4th paragraph said, "I love you." It said nothing else. It was the 4th paragraph. It was 2 sentences long, and it was the hardest thing she had read in 6 years, and she sat with it for a long time. Then she put the letter down on the table, and she looked at the USB drive, and she thought about what her father had built over 9 years, with the quiet precision of a man who understood that the truth was worth documenting even when you were the only one who knew it was there. She called the number she had memorized. Eli answered on the 2nd ring. "I opened it," she said. "A pause." "All right," he said. "There's a USB drive. Records going back 17 years. She looked at the drive on the table. He built it himself. 9 years of documentation. He was quiet for a moment. "Are you at home?" "Yes." "I'll come to you, if that's all right." Pause. Or, "We can meet somewhere else." She thought about it. She had told him she would come to him, and she had come to him by calling him, and now he was asking where she wanted to meet, which was the correct instinct. The instinct that understood she needed to be the one directing the geography of the situation, at least until she had more information about the situation. "There's a coffee shop on Durant called Hartley's," she said. "An hour." "I'll be there," he said. She was there first. She sat in the back corner, which she had thought about and selected because it had sightlines to the door and to the street through the window, which was not her usual preference but had become relevant. She had the leather case in her bag and the USB drive in her pocket and her father's letter folded in her wallet, which was the most secure place she had on her person. Eli came in 8 minutes after she sat down. He looked around the room the same way he had looked around the library. Systematic and efficient. Found her, and came directly to the corner table. He sat down across from her and looked at her face before he looked at anything else, which she noted. "Tell me what's on it," he said. "I don't know the full contents yet." She said, "I know what my father said was on it, and I know the drive is encrypted and I know the passphrase. I haven't opened it on a computer yet because I wanted to talk to you first." He looked at her. "Why?" She thought about how to say it accurately. Because opening it on my computer, in my apartment, without understanding the security situation around me, is the kind of thing my father's letter specifically told me not to do. She looked at the table. He told me to understand fully what I was doing before I did it. I don't fully understand the situation yet. I came to get more of the picture before I made any more decisions. He held her gaze for a moment. What do you want to know? She had prepared her questions in the order she needed them answered. Who are the right people? The people you said should receive these documents. He was quiet for a moment. There's a federal task force that has been building a case against Mercer for 3 years. They have circumstantial evidence. These records would give them something concrete. He paused. They're the right people. How do you know about the task force? He held her gaze. Because I've been providing them with information for 18 months. She absorbed this. You're an informant. I'm a source, he said. There's a distinction. What's the distinction? An informant is someone inside an organization providing information to law enforcement about that organization. I'm outside Mercer. I have a different relationship to the situation. He paused. I'm in a position to know what Mercer is doing, and I'm in a position to want them stopped. And the task force is the most efficient mechanism for that. She looked at him. Not entirely altruistic. She said, You told me that at the library. Yes. What's your interest? He looked at the table. He looked at her. She recognized the pause again. The selective disclosure pause. But this time it was shorter, and what came out the other side of it was more than she expected. Mercer took something from my family 12 years ago. He said, a business. The legitimate part of what we do. They structured a deal that eliminated us from a market we'd been in for 30 years, and they did it through the kind of financial manipulation that your father's records probably document. He looked at his hands. I have resources, and I have motive, and I've been building a position for 12 years. The task force is how this ends cleanly. She sat with this. 12 years. She thought about 9 years of her father's documentation, and 12 years of Eli's positioning, and 6 years of her own questions filed without anywhere to put them. And she thought about the specific way in which a wrong number sent at 1147 on a Tuesday night had arrived at the right place at the right time. And she thought about her father's advice about understanding fully what you were doing before you did it. My father's letter, she said. He looked at her. He wrote it 2 months before he died. She said. He knew he might not have time. He gave me the case 3 months before the accident. She looked at the window and the street beyond it, and the ordinary Wednesday afternoon proceeding outside. He suspected what was going to happen. Eli was very still. I'm not asking you to confirm it, she said. I'm telling you that I know it, and you should know that I know it. She looked at him. 6 years of questions, with nowhere to put them. My father spent 9 years building evidence about the people who were going to kill him, and he gave that evidence to me, and now I have it, and I know where it needs to go. He looked at her for a long time. His face had the quality she had noted at the library when he said her questions were the right questions, which was not quite the assessment expression, and not quite anything she had a precise name for. The expression of someone who has encountered something that requires them to update what they thought they knew. What do you want in exchange? He said. For the documents. She had thought about this. She had thought about it in the evenings, and she had arrived at an answer that was the only answer she had. The accident report, she said. Everything that isn't in the official version. What actually happened on Route 9. He held her gaze. That I can get you, he said, and I want to be the one who delivers the documents to the task force. She said, not through you, directly, in person. He looked at her. That's a security risk. I know, she said. I've assessed it and I'm accepting it. My father spent 9 years building this. I'm not going to hand it to someone and walk away. She looked at him steadily. He left it to me because he trusted my judgment. I'm using my judgment. Eli looked at her for a long moment. He had the expression she now recognized as the one that came when he encountered something he had not expected and was revising his position. She was becoming able to identify the exact moment the revision concluded, which was a thing she found interesting about him. The specific visibility of his thinking despite the general quality of his stillness. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. She took the USB drive out of her pocket and put it on the table between them. She looked at it. She looked at him. "The passphrase is in my father's handwriting in my wallet," she said. "If anything happens to me, someone needs to know it exists and where it is." He looked at the drive. He looked at her. He did not say, "Nothing is going to happen to you," which was the thing most people would have said, and which would have been false, and which he appeared to know she would identify as false. He said, "I'll make sure the right people know." She picked up the drive and put it back in her pocket. She looked at the coffee that had arrived at some point during the conversation and that she had not touched. She drank some of it. It was cold. "He was a good man," she said. "My father. He was careful and he was precise, and he believed that the truth was worth documenting, even when you were the only one who knew it was there." She looked at the window. He was right. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was. It was a small thing to say, and he said it without performance, and she received it without performance, and the coffee shop was doing its Wednesday afternoon things around them, and she thought, "This is what it is to have someone who understands the weight of the thing you are carrying, and that is different from someone who tries to take the weight, and the difference matters." She finished the cold coffee. She put on her coat. She stood up and looked at him across the table. "I'm going to open the drive tonight," she said, "on an air-gapped machine, at the library, which has one." She paused. "I'll call you after." He looked at her. "I'll answer," he said. She went out into the Wednesday afternoon. She walked back toward the library, and she thought about 9 years and 12 years and 6 years, and the specific arithmetic of people who had been building things in separate rooms without knowing about each other and had ended up, by way of a wrong number, at 1147 on a Tuesday night, in the same room. The drive contained 412 files. She had opened them on the library's air-gapped machine at 9:47 on a Wednesday evening, after everyone else had gone home, and she had locked the front door and sat in the room they used for archival equipment and entered the passphrase, which was the third sentence on page 114 of a novel called Time's the Measure of Things, times that she and her father had read together when she was 11, and which she had read 12 more times since, and which she kept on the shelf nearest her bed. The passphrase worked. She had spent 4 hours going through the files. Not all of them. Not in depth, but enough to understand the architecture. Her father had been meticulous. He had organized 17 years of documentation with the filing logic of someone who understood that evidence was only useful if it was findable, which meant each file was named and dated and cross-referenced. And each financial record was paired with a context document that explained, in plain language, what the numbers demonstrated and why the demonstration mattered. He had also, she found, included a master index with a summary of the entire collection, which was the kind of thing a librarian would do, and which she recognized as the work of a man who had understood his audience, even without knowing who that audience would be. She had called Eli at 2 in the morning. He had answered on the first ring. 412 files, she said. He cross-referenced everything. There's a master index. She was sitting in the dark of the archival room with the drive in her hand and the screen still glowing. It's complete. The whole picture. 15 years of how they operated and the people they operated through and the amounts and where the money went. She paused. There's a section on the business your family was in. The deal they structured. It's all there. He was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? She thought about the question. She had been sitting in the archival room for 4 hours, reading her father's work, and she had found the section on Mercer's operational structure, and she had found the section on their enforcement methods, which used language that was clinical and which was worse for being clinical. And she had found the section on what happened to people who had the wrong information at the wrong time, which included a subsection on incidents in November of the year her father died, which used language she had read 3 times to make sure she was reading it correctly. "I know what happened on Route 9, she said. He was very still on the other end of the line. She could tell from the quality of the silence. He documented it, she said. Not his own accident. He couldn't have known in advance. But he documented the pattern, the way they handled situations like his. She looked at the drive in her hand. He knew they would, and he documented how they did it, so that when it happened, there would be a record." She paused. He was protecting the evidence, even as he knew it was going to cost him. She heard Eli exhale. It was a very small sound, and it contained something she would think about later. "Nora," he said. "I'm all right," she said. "I have the information I need. My questions have answers now." She looked at the dark window. "That's what I needed. 6 years of questions, and now I have answers, and I'm going to sit with them for a while, and then I'm going to do what needs to be done with this drive, and then I'm going to go home and sleep." She paused. "That's the plan." "That's a good plan," he said. She sat in the archival room for another hour after she hung up. She did not read more files. She sat with the drive and the dark and the specific weight of knowing something you had spent 6 years not knowing, which was heavier than she had expected, and also, in a strange way, lighter, because not knowing had its own weight, and this weight was at least one she could see the shape of and put down when she was ready. She went home at 3:15. She slept. She met Eli the next morning at a diner 2 blocks from the library. She had chosen the diner because it was her territory, a place she went every Thursday morning, and where the person behind the counter knew her order and did not look at her twice. She arrived first and was on her second coffee when he came in. He looked at her face when he sat down. She had noticed that this was something he did. Look at her face first, before anything else, as a form of information gathering that was not intrusive but was thorough. She had come to understand that this was his version of the assessment she did with documents first, the condition of the thing, then the content. "You read all of it," he said. "Not all. Enough." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "The section on your family's business. The deal they structured. It was a manufactured regulatory violation. They created the appearance of a compliance issue through a company they controlled, filed a complaint with the relevant authority, and used the investigation period to lock you out of a contract you'd held for 11 years. The investigation was closed when no violation was found, but by then, the contract had gone to a Mercer-adjacent entity, and the window to challenge it had closed." She looked at him. "That's what the files say." He held her gaze. He was very still. "Yes," he said. 12 years ago." "Yes?" She looked at her coffee. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what they took." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry for what they took from you," he said. She received this and did not say anything, and the diner was doing its morning things, and they sat in it, and the weight of what they each knew about what the other had lost was between them, present and not performed. "The delivery," she said. "I've thought about how I want to do it." He looked at her. He was waiting, which she had come to understand was his default. The specific waiting of someone who had learned that what arrived when you waited was more useful than what you produced by filling the space. "I want to meet the person on the task force who has been building the case," she said. "Not an intermediary. The person. I'm a librarian. I deal in primary sources. I want to hand the primary source to the person who needs it, and I want to explain the filing system so they can navigate it efficiently." She paused. "My father built an index, but I've spent the last 4 hours with it, and I can explain it faster than they'll be able to reconstruct it from scratch." He looked at her steadily. "Her name is Agent UN," he said. "She's been on this for 3 years. She'll want to meet you." "Set it up," she said. "This week. The drive doesn't leave my person until I put it in her hand." He looked at her. Something in his face did the thing she had been noting for days. The movement. That was not quite any expression she had a name for. And she had been watching it with the attention she brought to things she was trying to understand. And what she thought it was the specific expression of a person who has encountered someone operating at the exact level of precision and seriousness that the situation requires, and who did not expect this and is revising their model of the situation accordingly. "I'll call her today," he said. She nodded. She picked up her coffee. She drank it, and he sat across from her, and neither of them said anything for a while, which was a silence that was different from the other silences she had been in with him, the ones that were about information and assessment. This one was about having said the things that needed saying, and having heard the things that needed hearing and being in the space that came after, which did not require filling. "The accident report," she said. "What you said you could get me." He looked at her. "I can have it for you by tonight. Not the official version. I have the official version." "Not the official version," he said. She looked at the window and the street beyond it, the ordinary Thursday morning of it, and she thought about her father driving on Route 9 in November 6 years ago, knowing it was possible and having already made peace with it. And she thought about the letter in 4 paragraphs, and the 3rd sentence on page 114, and the careful cross-referenced files built over 9 years. And she thought he knew who I was. He left me this because he knew who I was, and he trusted what I would do with it. She looked at Eli. "He was right," she said. He looked at her. "About what?" "In the letter. The 2nd paragraph." She looked at her coffee. "He said I was the person whose judgment he trusted most completely." She paused. He was right to trust it. Ellie held her gaze. He did not say yes or agree or confirm, which would have been the social response, and which he did not appear to reach for. He said, "I know," and he said it the way he said things that were simply true. She finished her coffee. She put on her coat. She took the drive out of her pocket, which she had done and put back 3 times already this morning as a form of confirming it was there. And she looked at it and put it back. She looked at him across the table. "When I hand this to Agent UN," she said, "what happens to the situation around me, the people watching me?" He looked at her steadily. "Once the task force has the documents, Mercer's operational interest in you ends," he said. "The thing they wanted from you will be out of your hands and in the hands of people they can't approach. Watching you stops being useful." He paused. "There may be a period between the delivery and when they confirm it's happened. I'll make sure that period is managed." She thought about managed and what it meant from him, which was different from what it meant from most people, because from him, it was a practical description rather than a reassurance. "All right," she said. She stood. He stood. She was putting on her bag and she said, without looking at him, "The accident report. What you said you could get me." "Tonight," he said. She looked at him. He was standing across the diner table from her in the morning light, and he looked like what he was, which was a man who had been carrying something for 12 years and who had spent that time learning how to carry it without letting the carrying be all he was. And she thought about what it looked like from the outside when you were good at that, and what it looked like from the inside, and she thought she was beginning to understand both. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her. He said, "Your father would be proud of you." She had not been prepared for this. She had been prepared for information and practical planning and the specific, efficient quality of his responses, and she had not been prepared for this. And she stood in the diner with the morning light on the table between them, and she held it, the weight of it, which was large and warm and entirely true. And she did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that would be proportionate. She went out into the Thursday morning. She walked to the library. She sat at the reference desk, and she answered questions, and she helped a student find a primary source on municipal water systems, and she processed a return, and she catalogued a donation. And she did all of these things with the particular focus of a person who is doing the work that is in front of them while carrying something considerable. And she thought about her father, and about Agent UN, and about the third sentence on page 114. And she thought, tonight I'll read the accident report, and I'll know everything, and then I'll know what to do with knowing everything. And that is the plan. And it is a good plan. She thought about Eli saying, "Your father would be proud of you." She thought about it for the rest of the day. She met Agent Ewan on a Friday. The meeting was in a federal building downtown, on the 7th floor, in a room that had the particular quality of rooms where significant decisions were made, and which did not advertise this quality with anything except the quality itself. Agent UN was 40-something, with the specific efficiency of someone who had been doing precise and difficult work for a long time and had no energy left over for unnecessary things. She looked at Nora when she came in, and she looked at the drive, and she looked at Eli, who had come but was not in the room, who had said, "This is yours to do," and had sat in the waiting area on the 7th floor with his coffee, and the contained patience of someone who understood that waiting was its own form of work. "Nora Vass," Agent UN said. It was not a greeting. It was a confirmation. "Yes," Nora said. She sat down and put the drive on the table and put her hand on it. Not possessively, just placed. And she looked at Ewan and said, "My father built this over 9 years. He named every file and dated every document and wrote a context note for every record so that you would know not just what it said, but what it meant. He also built a master index." She paused. "I'm going to walk you through the index before I leave so you can navigate it efficiently. It will save you 3 days of reconstruction." UN looked at the drive and then at Nora with the expression of someone recalibrating. "All right," she said. They spent 2 hours in that room. Nora walked Ewan through the index structure, the cross-referencing system, the naming convention her father had used, and why. The 3-level hierarchy he had built from individual records to thematic clusters to the master timeline that ran from the earliest documented activity to 3 weeks before he died. She answered questions with the precision she brought to research queries directly, in the order of relevance, without elaboration that was not requested. UN asked questions that were good questions, the kind that showed she understood what she was looking at and was testing its integrity rather than its existence. Nora answered them all. At the end of the 2 hours, UN sat back and looked at the drive and then at Nora and said, "Your father was very thorough." "He was," Nora said. "This is enough," UN said. "With what we already have. This is enough." Nora looked at the drive. She had carried it in her pocket for 8 days, and she looked at it on the table, and she thought about page 114, and a Sunday lunch in August, and a Sunday leather case with a brass clasp, and a man who had understood precisely what he was building, and had built it anyway. "Good," she said. She slid the drive across the table. UN picked it up. Nora stood. She put on her coat. She looked at UN across the table. "The accident on Route 9, she said. 6 years ago in November. Ren Vass." Ewan held her gaze. "It will be part of the case," she said. It was not an apology, and it was not a reassurance, and it was the most accurate thing anyone had said to her on the subject in 6 years, which was that it would be documented. It would be part of the record. It would not be what it had been, which was unacknowledged. Nora received it and did not say thank you, and Ewan appeared to understand that she was not going to. She went out into the hallway. Eli was in the waiting area at the end of the hall, sitting with the coffee that had gone cold and reading something on his phone. He looked up when she came out and he put the phone in his pocket and stood. She walked to him and she stopped and she looked at him and she said, "It's done." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "UN said it's enough. With what they have, it's enough." He nodded. The nod of a man who had been building toward this for 12 years, receiving confirmation that the building was finished, which was not a small nod, and not a large one, but the precise nod of the weight of the thing. She stood in the federal building hallway at 11:30 on a Friday morning, and she thought about done, and what done meant, and what came after done, and she thought, my father's work is in the right hands, and it will do what it was built to do, and the questions I had for 6 years have answers now, and the answers are documented and will be part of the record, and that is everything I came here to do, and it is done. She thought about what came after done. She looked at Eli. He was looking at her with the expression she had been cataloging for 10 days, the one she had been watching with the attention she brought to things she was trying to understand. And she had come to understand it now in the way that you came to understand something when you had enough data and had given it enough time, which was that it was the expression of a man who had been operating at a remove from the thing he most wanted to be close to, because the remove was what he knew how to do and the closeness was not, and who was standing in a hallway on a Friday morning with 12 years of something finished, and who was at the edge of the remove and not certain yet what was on the other side. She understood this because she was also at the edge of something. She was a person who gathered data before acting, and she had been gathering data for 10 days, and she had enough data, and she had thought about it enough, and she had arrived at the conclusion she had been building toward. "There's a thing I want to tell you," she said. He looked at her. "When I sent the text," she said, "the wrong number. The reason I looked at the wrong contact was that Jess Navarro and the number I sent to are next to each other in my contacts because the contact was saved under a name that starts with the same 2 letters as Jess." She looked at him. "I save contacts carefully. I'm methodical about it. I looked at the wrong one because it was late, and I was frightened, and my hands were shaking." She paused. "I've been thinking about what name I saved your number under. In the library. After you showed me the number on your phone and left." He was looking at her. "I saved it under E," she said. "Just the letter, not a name. Because I hadn't decided yet what category to put it in." She looked at the window at the end of the hallway, which showed a slice of city. "I've decided now." He was very still. "I'm going to call you tonight," she said. "Not because of the situation. The situation is done. I'm going to call you because I want to talk to you, and I think you want to talk to me, and I've been talking around this thing for 10 days, and I would like to stop talking around it." She looked at him. "Is that accurate?" He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." "All right," she said. "Tonight." She went down the elevator and out of the building into the Friday noon, which was bright and cold and entirely ordinary, and she stood on the pavement for a moment and breathed the ordinary air of it and thought, done. And after done, she went back to the library. She answered reference questions and helped a graduate student navigate a database and updated a finding aid that had needed updating for 2 months. And at 4:30, she sat at her desk and took out her phone and looked at the contact saved under E and thought tonight. She thought about the specific arithmetic of wrong numbers. She had a graduate degree in information science, and she understood that information was only as useful as the pathway it traveled. And she had spent 10 days observing that the pathway from 1147 on a Tuesday night to a federal building on a Friday morning had been built from things that did not look like pathways when you were inside them. A wrong digit in a contact, A man already on a street for a different reason. A leather case with an unopened clasp. A passphrase hidden in a book about measurement. None of these things had been designed to be a pathway. They had become one because the people carrying them had continued forward and paid attention and been willing to arrive at things they had not known were where they were going. She finished her shift. She went home. She made dinner and ate it, and washed the dishes and sat at the kitchen table where she had sat for 3 evenings with the leather case before her, which was now empty, and which she had washed, and which she had put back in the side pocket of her bag. Because it was still her father's, and it was still hers, and it had done what it was made for, and now it was just an object again, and objects that had done what they were made for deserved to be kept. At 8:15 she called the number saved under E. He answered on the first ring. "Are you hungry?" she said, and then she thought about the context and said, "That's not actually what I meant to lead with." There was a pause, and then he said something she had not heard from him before, which was a sound that was brief and low and that she recognized as a laugh. The specific laugh of a person who did not laugh often, and for whom laughing was therefore more precise than for people who did it all the time. "No," he said, "but I could eat." She looked at the kitchen around her. She thought about the diner 2 blocks from the library and the coffee shop on Durand and the Federal Building hallway. She thought about the specific geography of the last 10 days, which had all been places chosen for practical reasons, and she thought about what a non-practical reason for a place looked like. "There's a restaurant on Vine," she said, "near where I was when I sent the text. I've walked past it 100 times and I've never gone in because I could never figure out the right occasion for it." He was quiet for a moment. "What kind of restaurant?" "The kind that's been there for a long time and has good light and doesn't take reservations," she said. "The kind you go to when you want to be somewhere rather than somewhere specific." "What time?" 8:45. "I'll be there," he said. She put on her coat. She picked up her bag with the empty leather case in the side pocket. She went out into the Friday evening, which was cold and lit the way Friday evenings were lit in this city when the weather was right and the street lamps were doing their job. And she walked to Vine, and she stood outside the restaurant and looked at it, and then she went in. He was already there. She had not given him an address, only a street, and he had arrived before her and was standing at the bar with his coat over his arm, and he turned when she came in because she understood by now that he turned when things he was waiting for arrived, not before and not after. She went to where he was standing. "You found it," she said. "Vine, near the park," he said. "There's only one restaurant on that block that's been there a long time." She looked at the restaurant, which had good light and a quality of having been occupied by people eating meals for many years and not being ostentatious about it. She looked at him. "My questions have answers now," she said. "All of them." He held her gaze. "Yes, that's a different thing," she said. "From how I've been living for 6 years. I don't have a reference for it yet." He looked at her. "You'll build one," he said. She thought about this, and thought it was true, and thought that building was something she was capable of, which was not a thing she had always known about herself, and was a thing the last 10 days had made clear. She looked at the restaurant and at him, and she thought, "I sent a text to the wrong number at 1147 on a Tuesday night, and the person who received it was on the street for a different reason, and replied in 9 seconds, and the 9 seconds and everything after them were the beginning of something I did not know. I was beginning, and I am not filing this under wrong," which was where it started. Because the wrong number was the right number, and I know that now, and I am going to sit with it for as long as it takes to understand it fully, which is what I do with things that matter. "Let's go in," she said. They went in. They were seated at a table with good light. She ordered and he ordered, and the restaurant was doing its Friday evening things, and she sat across from him and thought about everything and said nothing about everything and talked about other things. Small things. The particular things you talked about when the large things had been said and you were in the space that came after, which was the space where you found out who you were with the large things set down. She found that she knew the answer to that already. She found she had known it since a man had looked up at the top of the library stairs at 10:15 on a Wednesday morning and found her at the reference desk and come directly across the room. She finished her dinner. She drank her wine. Outside the restaurant, the city was doing what it did on Friday evenings, which was everything at once and without apology. And inside the restaurant, the light was good, and the food was good, and the person across the table from her had received 43 words at 1147 on a Tuesday night and replied in 9 seconds and had been in the right position. And she thought, that is the whole of it, and it is enough. And I know what to do with enough. Later, when she was home and it was late, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with the last of the evening's quiet, she opened her contacts and found the entry saved under E, and she changed the name. She saved it under his name. She put the phone down, and she looked at the kitchen, and she thought about her father, and she thought about Route 9, and she thought about the third sentence on page 114, and she thought, it's done, and you can put it down, and you don't have to carry it alone anymore. And that was what you wanted. And it happened, and it was enough. She went to bed. She slept. Outside, the city continued, as it always did, and in the morning there would be more things to understand, and more data to gather, and more questions to answer, and she would be ready for them. Because she had her father's method and her own precision, and a contact in her phone saved under the right name. And that was, for tonight, everything she needed.